right.
What's up, everyone? We are live. Going to be kind of just sharing our links online real quick, guys. So just bear with us for a minute or two. It's one right there. And then we'll allow everyone to come in for about a minute or two, and then we'll get started for everyone. And this is going to be obviously when we're done going live. You guys can go back and rewatch it, so don't worry about missing anything.
Also, make sure you guys let us know if there is any sound issues and all that fun stuff.
Absolutely. All right. I see some people checking in. All right. Well, welcome everyone. This is kind of our first one of the year. We did this kind of last year, doing kind of a preview. I know towards the end of last season, just with all the craziness with our normal lives, we've had to kind of go into our live session this time around, try something different. So appreciate everyone, obviously, for tuning in. Another important week of football. We're getting into week 4. What we're going to do is we're going to go through all the games, give our game picks. We're not going to take deep dives because we've got to go through 29 games. We want to be here all night. And we also have Thursday night football, so I know people are going to be wanting to tune into that. And then at the end, we're going to answer questions. So if you guys want to give questions, you can put it in the chat. When we start talking about the game, I would like to see chat kind of put in the comments who they think is going to win when we get to that game. We have Mars here, which he gave his picks last week, but he is here in person.
I had to talk about, there's a lot of slander being thrown at me, and I am here to rectify the slander. That is the key thing. I'm not there for the slander. I have to fix that. That's just how it is.
You know? Yeah. So he's here to defend himself and his picks. He's tired of running, and so he's here. And so let's dive into it, guys. I'm gonna go through the schedule about what this is going on this weekend. Make sure to guys hit that thumbs up if you haven't subscribed. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, and if you have questions, throw them in the chat. The Patreon members get first dibs. We've already collected the Patreon question, but the chat questions will be answered at the end as well. And we'll get to all the games and pick them. So don't ask a question like, "Hey, what's your game pick for this?" Right? So we're obviously going to get there. So if you have other questions, make sure to put in the chat. Let's dive into the schedule. Let's start with 1A. Yorktown at Greeley. It's really a non-league week for these guys, for this league. So we got Yorktown at Greeley. Yorktown's 4-0 at Greeley, who's 2-2. Somers at Harrison is probably one of the bigger matchups this weekend. Both of them at 3-1. That's a non-league game. We have another really interesting one to me, Mars. Eastchester 3-1 at Brewster. That's 2-1. I thought that was, that's an interesting matchup. We have Clarkstown North at Fox Lane. Clarkstown North is 0-3. Fox Lane is 1-2. Clarkstown South is 1-2 at Mahopac. That's 2-2. And then we have Pelham at John Jay Cross River. These are all non-league games, like I mentioned. And when we go to AA, we have Arlington at Mount Vernon, which is a league game. Suffern at North Rockland is a non-league game. Big rivalry, but non-league games are on opposite ends. We have Mamaroneck at White Plains. Ossining at Carmel. Rochelle at Scarsdale. RCK at Yonkers Brave. And John Jay's Fishkill at Yonkers Force. That one's a very interesting one to me. When we go down to B, the schedule looks at Pleasantville at Lakeland. Sleepy Hollow at Pearl River. Rye Neck at Hen Hud. Nanuet at Rye. Nanuet at Edgemont. Croton-Harmon at Ardsley. Putnam Valley at the Briarcliff Hamilton football program, excuse me. Byram Hills at Irvington. Albertus Magnus at Hastings. That one's a non-league out of the group. For C and D, we have Valhalla at Dobbs Ferry, that big rivalry between those two programs. Bronxville at Haldane. Westlake at Tuckahoe, which they had a really good game last year. Their rematch this year. And then a C versus kind of Hudson Valley Football League matchup, Woodlands at Ramapo. And then when we get to the Hudson Valley Football League, we also have Portchester at Spring Valley, Walter Panis at Tappan Zee, and Poughkeepsie at Peekskill. And so that's the schedule, guys. And now we're going to kind of dive into our game picks. And again, appreciate you guys for tuning in. Like we mentioned earlier, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, throw any questions you guys have in the comments. Keep it civil, folks. We'll answer questions at the end. But let's dive into the game picks. I want to start with 1AA, Mars, the big league, and then we'll go all the way down. So again, if you miss anything, guys, you guys can go back and watch it. Arlington 4-0 at Mount Vernon, who's 1-2. This is a league game, Mars. And obviously Arlington is off to a tremendous start. They have scored 34 plus points in all 4 games. And Mount Vernon has a lot of beef up front. They're big, Mars, but they have struggled the last couple of weeks defending the run. And that's kind of the big concern I have. They've given up 36 points each of the last 2 games. So interesting to see how Mount Vernon plays this time around against the big physicality of Arlington, their ability to run the ball with guys like Resigno, their quarterback, who's been tremendous, and Davenport, right? And they even have another back in DeGusto who's also been making a bunch of plays. So to me, they have multiple guys with that big offensive line. I am going to go with Arlington. They also have a plethora of wide receivers, but to me, this might be a running game where they can run for big yardage. I do think Mount Vernon has some good athletes and good size, but Arlington is on a roll right now, and defensively pitched a shutout last week. I'm going Arlington.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the overall kind of outlook between these two teams, I mean, Mount Vernon definitely has size compared to a lot of other teams that Arlington might go up against, and Arlington kind of has the advantage of not just having size, but having the lethal ability to make cuts and just be able to take advantage of the slightest of kind of, I guess you would say, the slightest openings that they have. And I think Resigno has to have a lot of credit here. He's been fantastic so far this season, but so has Davenport. I think the big guys up front are really going to be moving people around, and that's why I also picked Arlington for this game as well.
Yeah, and I know I see Low Hub's picks came out this morning. I think they had Arlington both as well. Let's go to one of the big rivalry games here. This is a huge one. It's a non-league game. Suffern 3-0 at North Rockland, who's 3-1. Non-league, right? They're on opposite ends of the spectrum here, but a big-time rivalry game. And this one's definitely one of the most intriguing ones this weekend. When you look at kind of Suffern is more that, I would call them a surprise team, right? Even though in the team previews, I thought they had some talent coming in, but they weren't talked a lot about in the kind of wide world of AA. And they are off to a very good start at 3-0. And when you look at North Rockland, they started 3-0. They had an upset loss to Ossining last week. And offensively, Mars, they had 5 fumbles and an INT. So they put themselves in a really bad spot last week. But this is a team that has a lot of talent. Offensively, it's kind of been mixed. They've been trying to figure themselves out, but it all starts with the running game with guys like Gamey Savor. And Farrar, I thought, had a very strong week last week as a receiver and on the defensive side. He's their big play threat on the outside, but this offense has to protect the football. That's kind of the number one thing, that they put themselves in such a bad spot last week. And defensively, they gave up over 200 yards rushing last week. So both sides of the ball could definitely show some improvement. They have some talent. They forced a lot of turnovers throughout the year. Look to see them back at home answer in a big way. But when I look at Suffern, Marshall, offensively, their quarterback Palumbo has been strong in the last couple of weeks. But it's their running game and this offensive line that's kind of been the big spark plug. Jeff Joseph had 223 yards and 2 touchdowns last week. This offensive line has, I think, been one of the most impressive offensive lines out of all the big schools and probably the biggest surprise. And also this defense, 6 points each of the last 3 games, Mars. They are playing at a high level on both sides of the ball. This game is going to be very close, and it can go either way. I'm going to go with Suffern. I think they go on the road, and they're just playing at a high level on both sides of the ball. North Rockland's still trying to figure things out offensively, and I do think they'll get better as the year goes along. But I'm going to go with Suffern in this one.
Yeah, I mean, you make a lot of good points, man. And I feel like when you look at this is going to be a battle. I think this is one of those games that is a coin flip, and I think that when you have a rivalry game such as this one, I feel like it's always hard to pick the right answer. I think North Rockland had really a bad game. I think they kind of just kept shooting themselves in the foot at every single turn. The turnovers were outrageous, but I feel like, yeah, they're going to definitely have a better game coming in this week. But I just think that Suffern has just the more complete package, and I think they just have more of the advantage because now they don't really have as much of the pressure on them. They were the underdog this whole season, so they kind of now are just they're playing above what everyone's expectations are. And I think that is what gives them the advantage. And I think that when you look at Suffern, their defense is really what impresses me the most, and their run game has just been phenomenal. So I'm going to also go with Suffern here.
All right, we both got Suffern on this one. I'm seeing some of the questions on the side, and any of the big thought ones I will save towards the end. But really quick thoughts on Lakeland's defensive backcourt. I actually really like their defensive backcourt. They have good speed to them. Gallagher has been a big-time playmaker for them. I think that's their kind of, I'm not going to say best aspect of their defense, but probably the group that has impressed me the most. So that's that one right there. I saw someone say, nice haircut. Appreciate you, Narble. Thoughts on Somers' offensive line with missing guys like Polito? Obviously, replacing Polito is near impossible, but I thought the group so far has been pretty strong. I think it's one of the big things that separates Somers from everybody else is the consistency on the offensive line. Mark, any quick thoughts before I move to the next game?
No, I think one of the questions, why do you have Suffern for over North Rockland? I mean, we kind of just talked about it, but I just feel like as if, Suffern has that, I think, underdog mentality. I'm not saying that North Rockland has like the ultra favorites or anything, but there's a difference between when you're entering the game when you are not seen to be the win. Like you have a lesser chance of winning according to everybody else, and you have more of an edge that's on you, and you want to just prove everyone wrong. I'm not saying North Rockland doesn't have that. They had a tough outing against Ossining. Obviously, they had one of the worst like turnover ratios I think they probably had in their school career. I think that week, but I think it's going to be a battle. I just think Suffern has more, I think, going in that momentum. I think North Rockland now has to pull themselves back from having a bad loss and, really show up. You know what I mean? I think that's the big thing. Yeah.
Do I think anyone is close to Travis Carlucci in the Hudson Valley Football League? Hudson Valley Football League, there are a bunch of talented players in the Hudson Valley Football League, but Carlucci at full strength, I think, is the best player in the league. For the Hudson Valley Football League. So that's my thoughts on that. Let's go to the next game. AA Mamaroneck 2-1 at White Plains, who's 0-3. This is a league game. White Plains is still trying to figure things out for them, Mars. They have a young quarterback. They have a couple talented backs, but they've just given up way too many big plays. They've given up 20-plus points in all 3 games this season defensively, and preventing the big play is going to be huge. And when I look at Mamaroneck, quarterback Mackey deserves a lot of credit. He's become more and more efficient as a passer. Last week, 9 of 11 against the talented defensive back group of Rochelle and 3 touchdowns. He also runs the ball. We know that very well. And their wide receiver, Smeal, has kind of been a big, reliable target for them in the passing game. But I give a lot of credit to this linebacking core. TJ Smith and this defense swarmed to the football. And this offensive line has been more and more impressive as the weeks have gone along. I'm going with Mamaroneck. They're starting the season off 2-1. Could go to 3-1 with this win. After losing the amount of starters that they did last year would be an unbelievable feat. I think they do it, Mars. They go 3-1.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at like Mamaroneck, and I do agree with you, when you lose a lot of seniors and a very talented team last year, it's always hard to bounce back. And I feel like they have just been really similar to Suffern. They've been exceeding expectations, and I feel like that's been giving them a lot of energy this season. And White Plains, as you mentioned before, it's a relatively younger group, especially a young quarterback. It's a really growing pains. You have to go through them just to at least get that momentum going. And the fact that Mamaroneck is having more momentum, especially on their offensive line, it's like everything's going right for Mamo, while at the same time it's still growing for White Plains. And for that reason, I'm not copying you. I've had these picks before you told me. I'm also going to go with Mamaroneck as well. I feel like they're going to get a third win here, and they're going to, like you said, surprise a lot of people that thought that they were going to have a bad year.
Yeah, so we're agreeing up to this point. Let's go to the next one. Another AA game, Ossining 1-3 at Carmel. That's 2-1. And let me just say this: 2 teams coming off huge victories. Ossining had that huge upset against North Rockland last week. Carmel, after they were embarrassed versus Arlington, comes back with a huge victory versus John Jay's Fishkill. And I got to say this, on the Carmel end, a lot of credit needs to go to the coaching staff and the players there. A lot of questions, especially after that Arlington game. And I gave them a little bit of a ripping in my recap defensively, because you give up 55 points and 600 yards. I know you're missing some key guys, but that's just not good enough. And I know that you're missing coaches, a lot going on, injuries. I think it shows a lot of character to come back the next week against a top-level opponent and win that football game. And how did they do it, Mars? Up front. They dominated up front with their size and physicality running the football. They had over 225 yards rushing last week. look for that to continue. Remember, Friday is going to be an ugly weather game. It's supposed to be storming on Friday. So teams that can run the football efficiently could be in the advantage here. And these are two teams that can. And so Carmel running the ball over 225 yards, led by Werlau, who had 135 yards and 2 touchdowns. And this defense had 4 sacks, I think 2 INTs last week. They allowed negative 33 yards rushing, Mars. So look to see they got to stop Ossining's run game. And if they protect the football, I think they can control the tempo of this game and run downhill. And I think that's the formula for them. Ossining on the other end, they played really well last week. They had over 200 yards rushing as well. LaFaro was a big key part of that. He had 200 on the ground himself. They rushed over 200 yards. He was a bell cow for them. And this defense really got after it. Guys on the defensive front like Aiden Moore, Marlon Weedles, they only allowed 66 yards rushing last week. That's going to be so important. They got to limit Carmel's run game or they're going to run down their throat. So if they can limit the rush game and be able to show their ability to run the ball, Ossining will keep this close, but I'm going to go with Carmel, Mars. I think they put themselves right back in the driver's seat, winning against East Fishkill with North Rockland losing, and Carmel has the chance now to push that momentum forward. I think they do. They win.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with you, man. I think the fact is, both teams had a good win last week because you had for many different reasons. Like they're on the opposite spectrums of the reasonings for doing so. And I feel like when you look at how Carmel had a lot of people that were, including you, kind of tore them apart for losing the way they did against Arlington. And, they bounced back.
It also helps with Grizzly and Santiago coming back.
Yeah, they come big
let's not question that. They are big-time players.
Yeah, big players coming on back. And I feel like that is a big deal for Carmel because it allows them to at least set that momentum again for themselves. But I feel like in this game, it's really going to be up to the offensive and defensive lines. I feel like Carmel, I think, is going to have the advantage here. I'm going to go Carmel to win because I think their O-line is going to really stabilize the run game. And I just think their front seven is really going to stop or at least slow down Ossining's rush offense. And I feel like that's going to give Carmel that advantage and just the control of the play clock, control of the time of possession.
Yeah, and I see a couple questions. Really do appreciate you guys throwing those questions in. I will save them until we get to the game because I see one about Ardsley's offensive line versus Croton-Harmon's defensive front, which I'll save for that game. Thoughts on Rye this year, disappointing or meeting standards? Guys, stay tuned. Football 256. I'll answer that when we get to the Rye game as well. But let's keep continuing. This is one that I do want to bring up a Patreon question for the next game. Rochelle 1-3 at Scarsdale. That's 2-1. This is a big rivalry game as well. These two teams have played each other a lot. And again, when I go to my Patreon group, which again, I always appreciate our Patreon team, our Patreon community. They huge part in our growth. And can't thank you guys enough. But we did get a question, and Marge, you can still hear me, right?
Yeah, I can hear you, man. Okay,
great. One of the questions we got for Patreon kind of addresses the Rochelle thing, and he sent it in and asked, what is going on with Rochelle? Coach Lorenzo leaves, and can you explain kind of this decline? They love Coach Red. He's a wonderful guy. But can someone explain what is kind of the decline of Rochelle? And so I'll address this, Mars, before we dive into the game, right? And it's not an easy question, especially when you're not in the locker room and in the program, right? Those are the best people to ask. But from an outsider's view, Rochelle has always, number one, they've always had great talent. And Coach Lorenzo is probably one of the greatest coaches in Section 1 history, right? So one thing he did well besides being great at X's and O's and motivation is he had a protective bubble around Rochelle. And there's Catholic schools like Iona Prep and Stepanak who feast on players, and that's their kind of pipeline is the players in that area, right? And all the teams, other programs around them have had to suffer that, barrage of that recruitment because they are tremendous football programs. Now, the winning does dull that threat. So when you start to lose or when Lorenzo leaves, it creates a lot of question marks. And I think Coach Red is a very good guy, and I think their staff is very strong. The problem that there is that bubble is kind of dissipated, and you can kind of see it even from going up the program. The JV program has always been dominant, right? But they're not as dominant. Right? They're not as strong, right? And you can see it kind of filters in because they have to deal with not only playing the game, but also the outside presence of those Catholic schools. And they're not the only program that deals with that. And the thing, how do you resolve it? Well, you got to continue to try to win and be competitive. You have to try to build that tight-knit in your youth program all the way up to the varsity program and show, hey, we can make things great going forward. I think the biggest difference to me evaluating New Rochelle, I still see those very talented skill guys, Mars. But the big difference to me is the guy is up front in the trenches, right? They've always had big, strong, and fast guys up front. It's been a little more mixed this time around for the last couple years. And again, they still had a bunch of successful seasons, 6-win season, 7-win season. But those 9-0, 9-0, 9-0, like 4 straight section titles, is that there? No, it's not, right? We've seen that the last couple of years. Quick thoughts, Mars, before we dive into the game.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the biggest thing is, and maybe I sound like a homer because I'm a hog coach, and I was a hog growing up and everything, but it's always up to the line up front, right? And when you lose the consistency of the massive guys up front that can really move and get to the second tier, get to the linebackers, you lose that ability to do that. It means that your backs are now going to hit more in the backfield, more at the line of scrimmage, and that means you're not getting the dominant run game, which New Rochelle has always had. They've always been consistently dominant up front, whether it was on the offensive side or defensive side. So I agree with you. I feel like you're losing a lot of that talent to local Catholic schools definitely plays that role. Because like you said, the staff in New Rochelle is very good. It's really now you're losing the same level of talent. Like, back in the day, I mean, when we were playing.
Sometimes they had NFL players, right?
Yeah,
but
I was saying.
That Dorenzo bubble, which you have to rebuild, is gone. Right. Yep. So you have to, again, rebuild that bubble to kind of protect you from those outside forces. It takes a lot of time and behind the doors work, which is not an overnight thing.
Yeah, I agree with you, man.
Yeah, they have to play a game. They got to go to Scarsdale, who's 2-1. And talking about New Rochelle, let's talk about on the football field, right? Because that's another aspect. And they're 11-1 versus Scarsdale. They have won 9 straight versus them. But this offense has struggled. And they've scored 7 or less points 3 out of the last 4 games. And so they need to get some consistency. I think it's an identity thing. They want to run the ball off tackle and to the outside. And is that using their running back like Maple? Is that using their wide receivers on jet sweeps like Dawson and their quarterback James running the ball? They got to do what you said, right, Marcus, which is they want to dictate things. They want to dominate in the run game. And this is a young offensive line, a very inexperienced offensive line. It is obviously taking longer than they hope to get things together, but their offense has to play more consistently. That's going to be extremely important. Defensively, they're going up against the option, right? So you have to be, each level of your defense has to be disciplined, starting at the defensive line with Roan, the outside linebackers like Rhett, and then getting to the second level with guys like Anderson, all the way up to your secondary, who has to be aware of the play action that Scarsdale has done pretty well these last couple weeks. So it's going to be about discipline is the huge part. They have the speed. Can they match physicality? And can they be disciplined is the big question. For Scarsdale, they have won 2 straight. Their fullback, Gilligan, has been tremendous. He had 3 rushing touchdowns last week. Knopp is another playmaker at the halfback spot, whether it's on counters or pitches, that he has done very well. Rosen seems to be getting more comfortable in the option game, but this is definitely a step up in speed that they're playing against. This offensive line has to dictate things. Those are going to be the big components. Defensively, 2 straight shutouts, Mars. They have forced 3 turnovers. All this together, it's hard for me to. New Rochelle's history is so overpowering, and their speed at the skill position is very enticing. But I am going to go with Scarsdale. They have just been more consistent on both fronts, and I think that's a big difference. If Scarsdale can limit the big plays, I think Scarsdale can win at home, and I think they do. I'm going Scarsdale.
Yeah, I feel like the biggest thing when it comes to this game is that who can really contain the other side's best aspect. And if New Rochelle has the speed, if Scarsdale could slow them down and try to seal everything in and get everything back into the mesh, get into the trenches, then I think Scarsdale is going to have a major advantage. And like you said before, can New Rochelle's defense play the disciplined football, play everyone doing what they're supposed to do, tackling who they're supposed to tackle? Because on this option style of offenses, it's key for that, right? And I think that's what the key thing is going to be for New Rochelle. But I'm also going to agree with you. I think Scarsdale is going to take the advantage at home. Well, you said 11-1 total overall. This is going to be 11-2. Yeah, it's going to be that second win is going to go to Scarsdale. I feel like at home everything's going well for them. Momentum's on their side. I'm going Scarsdale.
Another game, RCK, who's 0-3, is that Yonkers Brave, who's 0-4. This is a league game. Both teams trying to get their first victory, Mars. At times, I've seen Yonkers Brave offense be a little bit more efficient. They've had some spread. The passing game has been sharp at times. And at other times, they've had some really bad negative plays. Defensively, they're giving up way too much points. And when I look at RCK, similar situation. At times, the offense seems to be rolling. I think they can run the ball. They have some young guys up front that at times could be impressive, but the consistency is where you're trying to find. So these two teams battling it out. I know Yonkers Brave is at home, and usually when things are even, I like to go with the home team. I think RCK wins this one, Mars, gets the first victory on the road. I'm feeling a lot with the Road Warriors for a majority of these games, but I know the last couple were home, but I'm going to go with RCK on this one.
I can't believe you would doubt the Yonkers home field advantage, because I'm going to go Yonkers Brave. I think that they're going to get that little extra momentum, that they want to get that win. They want to play at home in front of their home crowd. And I think that they're going to get a lot more stabilized when it comes to their offense, and offense just moving the ball as well as winning the front, right? I think that's going to be the big thing. Getting that stable offensive push on the line and owning that time of possession is going to be key here, right? So I'm going to go Yonkers Brave, the home team, with that extra momentum.
All right, let's go to the final AA game, and then we'll drive to A. John Jay East Fishkill 3-1 at Yonkers Forest 3-1. Mars. This one's one of the more interesting ones out of the AA games for me. Obviously, when you look at John Jay East Fishkill, it all starts at the quarterback spot with Feliciano, and now he faced a lot of pressure last week. Carmel kind of overwhelmed them. He had a lot of pressure in his face, got hit a bunch of times. They like to roll out the quarterback. They like to do the design rollout. They like to have these deep concepts, these deep drags, these kind of throwbacks at times. And for that to work, you need a lot of time, right? So I'm looking for this East Fishkill offensive line to play a lot better than they did last week. The plays took a little bit too long to develop. And again, they had negative 30 yards rushing last week, Mars, with the sacks. They got to run the ball better with both Feliciano and the running backs. So I think the offense is going to respond. When I look at Yonkers Forest, Mars, this is a high-powered offense. They run a dual quarterback system. Both quarterbacks show the ability to run. Fields has had a strong running game. You know about Aquino, who's a big play threat. He can really burn defenses on deep concepts. And Everett has had a strong. I know last week wasn't his a high-powered game for him, but he's someone who's run the ball also consistently. This is a strong offense. Question I have is defensively, can they make enough plays defensively? I don't think they can. I think East Fishkill is going to control this game a little bit more. Defense is going to respond, playing the run a little bit better. I'm going John Jay.
Yeah, see, this was also a very interesting one for me, because I feel like both teams have good momentum. They have good control of the offense. I know that John Jay had, obviously, they were under duress against Carmel. They were really sending the heat. And obviously you got you have a Feliciano who's been really impressive this year. And I feel like John Jay usually when teams have a bad loss, they never really have two straight bad losses. And I feel like John Jay is going to regroup. They're going to figure out what is best for them. They're going to have to win up front to do so. I'm going to go with John Jay's Fishkill to kind of rebound and play on a tough road trip for them to go and win this game here.
Yeah, and one of the surprise teams has been Yonkers Forest so far this year. Let's go to A now, Mars. And Yorktown 4-0 at Greeley, who's 2-2. This is a non-league game. And when you look at Yorktown, probably one of the most impressive teams that we've seen so far in A. I don't think they were talked about enough in the preseason. I was high on them. So, again, when you look back, Mars, when they talked about Yorktown, just remember, but this team has really had a strong start to the year. They've scored over 40 points 3 out of the 4 games so far. Their quarterback Gonzalez has been really strong. He was very raw last year. You could definitely see a step up this time around. And this offensive line has been strong and physical, leading to this rush attack. And when you can have that balance between the passing game and the rush attack, you have a deadly offense. Delvecchio has been extremely impressive running the ball the last couple weeks. I know he pretty much carried the ball versus Mahopac to end that game. He also had a strong week last week. So this offense shows the ability they could beat you multiple ways, which to me is always an impressive offense. Defensively, they like to bring a lot of pressure. Vogel has been a huge playmaker for this team at the linebacker spot. Constantine is another one who's been a big playmaker, but they have multiple guys who have made big plays for them so far this season. And again, you just want to see them continue to grow. They've had times that they've had a lot of penalties. They've had times where the defense has kind of been a little lax at times and big plays have happened. But I've been very impressed with Yorktown. And when I look at Greeley, a huge win at the end last week versus Pelham. I thought it was a massive victory. Felt like they were treading a little bit of water the last couple of weeks, giving up way too many big plays. Defense made enough plays. The offense limited the turnovers. Osh had a huge touchdown towards the end of the game to give them the lead. Defense kind of closed the door. Listen, I like Greeley. I think they've, coming back into A, B, 2-2 is a strong start for the year. I think Yorktown's just a little bit too powerful, and I think they're going to run the ball consistently, control the tempo, hit a couple big plays. and they're going to create a lot of pressure for Osher. He's got to protect the football. I'm going Yorktown, Mars.
Yeah, listen, I feel like this is an interesting matchup because I feel like Greeley is definitely, after a big win, they're going to try to continue that momentum. They're playing at home, right? Obviously, having a home crowd behind you is always going to elevate your skills and elevate your talent. Yorktown has just honestly been dominating. And yeah, I do remember when you were talking up Yorktown at the beginning of the year. I think a lot of people were looking past Yorktown. I'm not sure how the boys from Low Hud were saying about them, but I didn't hear any whispers from Low Hud about how good Yorktown was going to be. But Frank here did his research. He knew, right? He was hiding in the bushes, looking over at Yorktown in the preseason.
I was spying on their practice.
He's hiding in the tree, spying on them. But yeah, you called it. Yorktown's been dominating up front. They've really just owned the line of scrimmage. Their run game has really been deadly, and on top of that, obviously having Gonzalez playing as well as he has, you see a major transformation from last year to now and how much he's grown. So I'm also going to go with Yorktown. I feel like they're going to continue this pure just domination this year, and I feel like it's going to be a really interesting matchups as we get closer to that playoff time. But I feel like Yorktown is going to win this game.
Yeah, and I appreciate the questions coming in. Again, I'll address them when we get to the game, so keep them coming, guys. Really do appreciate it. I did see someone ask, did we do Suffern versus North Rockland? Yes, we did. Don't leave, right? You can always go back and watch it. So we talked about that. We gave our picks. Let's go to the next A game, Mars. Somers 3-1 at Harrison 3-1. Probably one of the games of the week in this one. A rematch of last year's semifinals in the playoffs where Somers won. And let me just say this about Somers. They're one of the best teams without question. And when they play at a high level, there's not really teams that can beat them. The problem has been they have been off to slow starts consistently, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And I thought last week, they were up 20-0 on Mahopac, and it ended up winning 28-14. And I actually didn't think they played very well, right? So, to me, it was and that's a good and bad thing. The good thing is good teams find a way to win even when things aren't clicking, right? That's a good thing. The bad thing is if you consistently get to bad starts, at some point it's going to be hard to rev that up every week. So they definitely have to get off to a better start. And last week, Sullivan had 4 touchdowns. I thought he had a slow first half. He was 9 of 19 passing. The accuracy just wasn't there. It wasn't clicking offensively. And then again, it could be more than just, quarterback throwing. It could be the routes. It could be everything, right? So it's a mixture of things. And it didn't help that the offensive line, who has been dominant all year long, had a tough time opening lanes running the ball. So there was a lot of pressure on the pass game. I think, again, this time you're going up against a good front in Harrison. They're going to test it throwing the football. I don't think it's going to be easy running the ball, but they have to start off faster. They have to. They cannot be inaccurate. They can't turn the ball over. And again, if you get behind, you can't give Harrison momentum, right? So giving the balanced attack that Somers has, I think they're going to continue what they do best, which is that balanced attack. Running the ball downhill, quarterback runs, which they did a lot more in the second half, and the passing game kind of throwing to the slot receiver and testing these corners. If they're going to quarterback watch, they're going to try to hit them with some fast stuff and some RPO action, in my opinion. So that to me is defensively, I thought the defense played really well for 3.5 quarters, right? And before I go to them though, Palazzolo at the wide receiver spot in the slot, Mars, he is becoming more and more of a threat. He had a huge game last week versus Mahopac. He's made some big plays. And Mason Kelly at the running back spot, I thought in the first half he was kind of dancing a little bit, started running really hard in the second half. They have the weapons, and they have multiple guys who can do it. Defensively, 2 INTs last week, Mars, versus Mahopac. Cole was a big factor in the game last week, made some big-time plays, had a sack. This defense can generate a lot of pressure. Look for them to try to give Citro a lot of trouble up front, but they got to be able to defend not only just the spread offense, but some option game. Harrison might bring in their backup quarterback in Lanza to run more option games, so be wary of that. When I look at Harrison, this is probably their biggest offensive line test so far this year. I know they played Rye at week 0, but to me, this is the biggest test for this offensive line is this week, going up against guys like Cole. And I do think this offensive line is a strong offensive line, but this is going to be their strongest test. They got to be able to run the ball. If it's going to be a passing game, they're going to lose. So they got to be able to run the ball effectively, and then the play action where they can take deep shots to McLaughlin can open things up because Somers likes to play press. Right? They'll bring pressure. They'll play some press man. and they're going to leave some one-on-one opportunities. They're going to say, can you beat us? So a guy like McLaughlin can beat man coverage. So they can take some shots deep defensively, slowing down the run and kind of getting Somers likes to do the RPO action. You got to make sure your defensive backs take away inside leverage. Don't give away these slants. And if they go over the top, I think Harrison has the DBs that can run with speed. The question is, are they going to ball watch? That's the always concern that I have. They have a lot of talented guys. Bali Damaj at the defensive line, Santarelli on the defensive line. They're going to have some big games. Marco Marisi made some big plays last week with an INT. But you have Krupe, you have Lanza, you have McLaughlin at the DBs. They're really going to be tested because Harrison's got to get guys by the line of scrimmage. So those guys might be on an island. My winner, Mars, I know I said a lot. I'm going to go with Somers. I think Somers does win on the road. I think they get off to a faster start than what we've seen these last couple of weeks. I have a lot of respect for Harrison. I think Harrison's starters can play with anybody. They don't have a lot of depth, right? So I do think Somers is going to – they have guys who play offensive line, guys who play defensive line. Look to see them try to use their depth to their advantage in this one. I'm going to go with Somers. I think it'll be tighter than people think, though.
Yeah, here's the thing. I feel like what Somers has done or shown us is that they usually kind of have a good, by halftime it's solid, and then what they do is they play, if they're up by a few scores, they'll just lax it. Like I feel like that's what I saw last week with Mahopac. They kind of just were up by.
Yeah, they ramped it up. It's really the midway in the fourth quarter that happened.
But it was just like kind of like they coasted a little bit, and then all of a sudden it was then when they had to pick it back up again, they closed the game. Right. That's the problem with kind of having that mentality is that if you play a team that's on the same level as you are, they can make a comeback and they can win the game if anything. So you want to see the same fight again like they did like in the earlier aspects of the year where they were just dominating, everything was hitting all cylinders, and I feel like they can. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like Somers has the full capability of dominating any game, and I feel like it's all going to have to do with up front being able to hit on your runs and then be able to hit on all of those different passes you can hit, the combinations that you have, especially in play action. That will be what gets the Somers offense going. And defensively, they've always been very tough. They've always been hard-nosed to the ball. They've always lowered the amount of run game, and they're going to have to, obviously, with Harrison being a run-heavy team, in my opinion. I feel like that's what makes them better is when they run the ball in kind of that classic offense. I feel like when they hit that spread, it kind of gets them out of their game, out of their mojo. I feel like they can do that, but they have to establish the run game first. I feel like once they do that, once they have a real test, they can see their offensive line can push people around. That's going to be where we get to see how this game goes from here on out. So I feel like I'm going to also go with Somers is going to win this game. I think that they have everything going well for them. I feel like they're going to definitely be in a lot more, I guess you would say, more momentum in this game going forward. They're going away to Harrison. It's not an easy game to win, but I think Somers has the skill guys, the line. They just have everything going well for them right now.
Yeah, I'm interested to see Harrison kind of use the two quarterback system with Citro and Lanza and kind of the option game if that continues going forward. Let's go to the next one. This is another really interesting one in A. Eastchester 3-1 at Brewster. That's 2-1. This is a non-league game, but again, you're trying to see. All we hear about Mars is Somers, Yorktown, Mahopac, Harrison, South. The question is, who's after that? Right? You hear about that bunch. I'm not saying those other teams can't play with them, but that's the group you hear about, right? When you hear about A. Who's those next teams? And you have two of them potentially here. So I'm interested to see which team comes out on top in this one. And when I look at Eastchester, this offense is one that's been getting better and better as the weeks go along, and it starts with their quarterback in Schultz. Dual threat guy has been getting more and more consistent, more and more accurate as he gets more and more comfortable. And this is a dangerous athlete. He was a wide receiver last year, moved to quarterback, had a little bit of rough moments in the beginning, but he's really started to pick things up and been a major threat in this offense. You have Brunner running the ball, McCloskey as a kind of a target. You've seen some playmakers at each level, but this offensive line, and to me, if they're going to compete with the upper echelon teams, it's with those guys up front. They have been strong so far this year, needs to continue against the bigger front of Brewster. And defensively, 3 straight games, Mars, are 7 or less points. They have playmakers at each level on this defensive side. I've been very impressed with this defense. I think they're one of the top defenses in A so far this year. When I look at Brewster, the offense, it's interesting. Brewster's offense has an interesting mix. They have their typical standard offense with some spread concepts, some downhill running concepts, and then they have this kind of like Eagles muddle huddle type quarterback sneak offense where they have 2 guys sitting in the A gaps and they run quarterback sneaks down the field. Like, I haven't seen that. And in high school, you're not allowed to impede the runner, right? So what they do is they actually push the lineman next to the quarterback, and the quarterback kind of just weaves his way through the mess. And it's because they have the size up front that it's worked for Brewster. But let's not kid ourselves. I mean, it's a focus on the run game, right? They have a 2-quarterback system. Dillon is more of the thrower. Fox is more of the runner. Barry is a big-time runner for them. He's averaging 6 yards a carry. And it's this offensive line who's going to have a size advantage over Eastchester that's going to have to dominate things. But I'm interested to see this kind of mix of offense that they use. Defensively, 2 straight shutouts, Mars. They have 6 interceptions on the year. They have forced a bunch of turnovers. Lamaro has been a big impact player at the linebacker spot. Walker has been another one leading the team with 31 tackles. And you have a Curso, Carlson, and both been impact players. Howell with 2 INT. So to me, I think this is going to be a defensive slugfest in this one. Low-scoring game. Team that can run the ball the best is probably going to win it. And I think it's going to be Eastchester. I get a little nervous about Brewster when they get down. If the game's tied, or they're only down 1 score, or they're up, they can run that kind of offense. But if they get down is where things make me a little bit nervous. I'm going to go with Eastchester to win in a defensive slugfest.
That was the interesting thing. I was actually going to say the same thing. I feel like when you are prioritizing this, like, kind of rugby offense that you're kind of running, like, that if you are down and you by like more than 1 touchdown, you're going to need to start changing it up because you're going to drain the clock completely. And I think Eastchester, is going to win mainly because of the fact that I think they just have more ways to score, more weapons on the offensive end. Defensively, they're both very equal when it comes to just locking down their opponents. But I just think that Eastchester has more of an advantage on the offensive end. So I'm going to go with Eastchester here.
Next up, Mars, Clarkstown North 0-3 at Fox Lane, who's 1-2. Both teams that are treading water, trying to figure things out. Clarkstown North has a lot of young guys, a lot of experience. Have to go to the road to Fox Lane, where their offense has struggled the last couple weeks. I'm going to go with Fox Lane, Mars. I think Fox Lane turns this thing around. I think defensively they've been okay. Offensively has been a struggle. They've been shut out, right? So they got to get back to running the football, going off of play action, protecting the football, avoiding the negative plays. They had a couple opportunities last week, did not capitalize on. But I do think at home they win this game. I'm going Fox Lane.
Yeah, I'm also going to agree. I think Fox Lane is going to throw the mess. They're going to throw the kitchen sink, and I think they want to get that win, especially at home. And I feel like this is a good moment for them if they can pull this off. And I think the offense is going to show up. It's going to surprise some people. I'm going to go Fox Lane.
Another A matchup, Clarkstown South, who's 1-2 at Mahopac, who's 2-2. This game is actually going to be played at Lakeland High School on Saturday because Mahopac's turf is not ready. This one is a very interesting one to me again, because first off, I do want to say, because I read a whole bunch of Low Hud articles because they do a good job covering the local sports here. And so I read all the articles from the football games, right? Now, one thing I saw that I do want to address, because maybe our chat can help me with, from the Mahopac-Somers game, I was hearing that, Somers, Harrison, and Yorktown were top 10 state-ranked teams. And I was just wondering where that came from, right? Because I was looking through, is that the state one or max preps? I'm not sure. Because when I was looking through the state one, Somers has been number 1 now a couple weeks. I think the only other top 10 team was Mahopac 2 weeks ago, right? I mean, Yorktown just got in the top 10 this week, but Mahopac was the only one before that was in the top 10. I think Yorktown was 11. Harrison was 25, I think. So maybe someone in chat can help me. I don't know where that came from, but I was just something I saw on Low Hud. I wasn't sure where it was. I was trying to look at the numbers. I was like, wow, they had 3 top 10 state ranked teams, but I just couldn't find it. So I just wanted to say that real quick. But talking about this game, Clarkstown South, they're a hard team to judge because at times their offense is very explosive and at times their defense plays well, but they never seem to do it in the same game except for one, right, where they won 47-0. And offensively, they moved the ball last week, but they had 2 turnovers, and then they had 3 times where they were inside the red zone and didn't come with any points. That can't happen this week. Mahopac's defense has done a very good job of forcing turnovers, and offensively for South, they got to be able to run the ball downhill and win off of play action. They like to roll their quarterback. They gave up way too much pressure last week. That can't happen this time if they want to win. That's going to be huge. Defensively, last week they only allowed 157 yards, They only gave up one score. I thought the defense played good enough to win, but again, they did struggle at times on outside runs, and I know Mahopac is going to test them towards the outside with guys like Koch running off tackle, running sweeps. Those are going to be big, and then the kind of the jump ball go routes or outs with Carney. So they're going to have to put someone, probably the best cover guy, out on Carney. They're going to have to defend the edge is going to be huge. Butler's going to have to be huge in this game. He's a superstar player. He's going to have to play like one. But some of these other guys like Holder and stuff, they're really going to have to step up if Clarkstown South wants to win this game and prove they're one of the elite teams. And hey, they need to prove it on both sides of the ball. For Mahopac, we know the big primary player, right? Koch on offense running the ball. Carney as the weapon on the outside. Sometimes they'll put them both at wide receiver, which puts a lot of pressure on your secondary. I thought last week offensively, they just weren't consistent until the fourth quarter, midway through the fourth quarter, when they really started to hit some of those big pass plays. I definitely think they're going to test South towards the outside and out on the edge with Koch runs and with Carney throws. I think that is their offense. Defensively, they've been a bend but don't break defense, and they've done a really good job of forcing turnovers. They have forced turnovers in every game so far this season, Mars. That has kind of been the MO, and it's been multiple guys. Owen Ryan's had a lot of success making some plays. I thought he's been their leading tackler. We've seen Koch get INTs. We've seen Maskell get INTs. We've seen Carney had a pick by the end zone last week. So they've had guys who have forced turnovers for them. Listen, I saw Low Hud pick Mahopac. I don't know your pick, Mars. This one is so hard for me because I can see both teams winning this game in their styles. But if I had to put me to the fire, I'm going to go with South. Everyone doesn't really give South, like when you talk about the elite squads. I know I mentioned them earlier because I think that they can be, but not a lot of people are putting South in that upper echelon with those other teams. Like you don't mention them with Somers and Harrison and Yorktown and Mahopac. They're kind of like that team in between. I think South has the talent, but can they put it fully together? I think this is the game they finally do. I think they're going to surprise some folks. This is kind of my upset of the week. I'm going to go with South, Morris.
Well,
I know, call me crazy.
Well, listen, I'll say this. I think that South has a lot of skill guys that can make a lot of plays. Mahopac has, I think, more skill guys that have been more consistent in my eyes. Like
consistency without question. Yeah. I think Mahopac has been more consistent.
Koch and Carney and Owen Ryan definitely had he's one of the top defensive players they have on the team, leading the team in tackles. They have all these guys that can do a lot of things. And, this was supposed to be one of those special nights for Mahopac. It was the unleashing of the new turf. So not going to have that, unfortunately, because of Lakeland, the turf is not ready to roll for the game. But I still feel like the momentum of the energy that is building up behind the team is what is going to drive them for this game. I mean, obviously, you come away in the Somers game and you're competitive. It makes it, you have to say, hey, we were competitive against the top team in the state. We should keep that momentum going. And I'm going to say Mahopac is going to win. I think that they have the full capability of winning this game, controlling the ball. And I feel like as if you ride the game along with Koch, right, you just let him do his thing like he always does. And especially knowing how he is with special teams, if he'll make a play on special teams. I don't
know how teams keep kicking to him. I got to tell you.
I don't understand the whole mindset.
I don't know if I'm opposing team. Don't kick to that guy. But if I'm
based on trends alone, they're going to kick. Someone's going to kick the Koch, and he's going to have a big play. Right? I just knowing that alone, I think that's what's going to happen. He's going to make a lot of plays on special teams, on offense, on defense. I think he's going to be all over the field. I expect nothing less from Koch. And I just feel like they're gonna control the line of scrimmage. But I'll say this, South, if you prove me wrong. I mean, at the end of the day, I just feel like Mahopac has a lot more going for it right now, and South has to kind of show up and kind of shut a lot of people up. Shut me and Low Hud up, right? That's
everyone is on the Mahopac train. South, are you hearing this?
Yeah, prove it.
Hearing this, prove me right. Give me that point up on everyone. All right, let's go to the final A game and then dive to B. Pelham 0-3 at John Jay Cross River, who's 1-2. And both these teams, Mars, offensively have been struggling. And I tell you what, Pelham, defensively, they've given up a lot of big plays. Offensively, it's kind of been a grind to get things consistently. But last week, you saw signs of it, right? Against Greeley, they were moving the ball. They scored some points. Defensively, they also made some big plays. But the defense then that giving up the big plays reared its ugly head towards the end, where Greeley drove down the field and scored to take the lead. And then they couldn't offensively bring it back. This offense is really focused on play action, running the ball, and getting the quarterback out on the edge where he can run and kind of have that run pass option where he can throw it or he can take off and run. When you look at Cross River, offensively, again, they've been shut out the last couple weeks trying to figure out an identity. They were replacing a lot of seniors, similar to what I said about Rochelle earlier in the show, trying to figure out that identity. I think they had the skill guys. They have to protect better up front. Offensive line-wise has been a growing pain. But this secondary defensively, I think, has the speed and athleticism that they can match up pass-wise. It's can they defend the run at a consistent rate? When I look at these two teams, again, I think it's very close in this one, but I'm going to go with the home team this time. I know I've been a road warrior for a lot of these picks. I think the home team, it's going to be homecoming, a lot of high emotions. I think John Jay Cross River wins this game, Mars. It'll be close for a while. Cross River pulls away at the end.
Yeah, I'm going to also go with John Jay Cross River. I agree with you. I feel like I usually pick in these really close games. I do pick the home team more often because of the fact that they have more momentum on their side, homecoming, right? All that stuff's going on, and I feel like they're going to find their stride on offense. They're going to keep it simple. I think they're not going to make it complicated. They're just going to win the down, win the play, get some yardage, and just have that O-line really make some bodies move around. So I'm going to go with John Jay Cross River.
And again, appreciate you guys so much for putting in those questions. I know a bunch of these were for B, so we're going to address your questions once we get to those games. Some of them brought up, did we do Suffern versus? I answered that question already. Thoughts on Dobbs Ferry? I'll give you my thoughts on Dobbs Ferry when we get to their game. We'll get there, guys. Don't worry. If you missed any picks, you can also rewind, guys, and then don't worry about that. So this is going to be posted. We have not done Rye Neck yet. RCK versus Yonkers Brave, we did do that. Mars picked Yonkers Brave. I picked RCK. So yeah, that was A. Let's do B now. Probably one of the biggest games of the week is Pleasantville 3-0 at Lakeland, who's 3-1. This is a big league game. Lakeland's off to a hot start. Pleasantville's coming off that major victory versus Rye last week. And let's start with Pleasantville, right? Huge victory. I loved the thought process after the game. I mean, it could have been a Super Bowl for Pleasantville, right? They had the big dogs come in. A lot of people talking about Rye. They win a huge home game. They could be riding high. But I love what they talked about after the game. And they said, yeah, Rye wasn't at full strength, and we made a lot of mistakes. We need to get better. And that, to me, was a great statement that I heard from Pleasantville. And it shows the focus that, hey, we won this battle, but our war is to win a section title, right? So we got to continue to grow. And I love that thought process. And we know Daniel Picard's a special player, but what separated me, Mars, last week is I saw other players make big-time plays in big moments. And it wasn't just Daniel Picard saved the day. Now, I do think this time around, Lakeland has struggled to defend the run consistently. I think Daniel Picard could have a very strong game in this one. But guys like Aiden Picard, I know he threw a couple INTs. He did make some good decisions on some throws and make some big-time plays. The guys like Eric Coleman, who was a big factor. McPhee had that touchdown over the middle. But I think this is going to be this offensive line establishing itself up front and a lot of Daniel Picard runs. And I think he's going to have a heavy game and then play action off of that. Some of these guys can hit some big plays in the offense. Defensively, this was another factor. The secondary had a great game last week. They have to have another great game this time. They had 4 turnovers, Mars, a couple of them INTs. You look at guys like McDermott, Mueller, Hodzinski, Picard. There's a bunch of guys. You look at the linebackers in Oregon and Sadao. They're going up against a high-level passing team who's got a couple of receivers who can be game breakers. So this secondary is going to have to step up. I know the coaching staff at Pleasantville likes to be aggressive. They're going to be sending their linebackers. They're going to have to try to get pressure on that quarterback. So at times, this secondary is going to be on an island against some talented receivers. How do they play this one? They did a great job last week. Got to do it again this time. When I look at Lakeland, Mars, Grady Leonard. He passed for 454 yards last week, Mars. He's been, I think, over 800 yards the last 2 games. He had 4 touchdowns. How this offensive line handles Pleasantville's pressure schemes and these linebackers shooting the A-gaps is going to be really important. Quarterback's got to be smart with the ball. Don't turn the ball over is a huge factor. That's what Pleasantville wants. They want you to get into negative plays, forcing turnovers. Gallagher and Perry, that duo at the wide receiver spot, has been very deadly. Pola Castro has kind of been a surprise running the ball. He's also, if you can find some balance here, because I'll say this, Pleasantville had a strong game defensively, but they at times were getting run on it. So can Lakeland take a little bit of advantage? I don't think they have the size of Rye, but can they run the ball a little bit? We'll see. Defensively, they have struggled versus the run. They got to play better against the run, or Daniel Picard is going to pick this defense apart. I'm looking at this. I think Lakeland has been a surprise team, not I guess to the wide audience, but to me, Lakeland's offense is very high powered. Defense has made enough plays, but I think Pleasantville is going to win on the road. Don't be surprised if Pleasantville, feeling good, might be surprised a little bit by Lakeland's speed, but I think they calibrate, they run the ball effectively. Pleasantville wins this game.
Yeah, so I'm not going to pick the game itself, but I could definitely talk about it. I feel like you kind of made a lot of good points. I feel like when you look at Pleasantville, the big thing is going to be about, who else other than Daniel Picard is going to win the game or really going to give a great performance to help elevate the team to the next level. And, last week you saw that against Rye, you saw like guys like Eric Coleman make big plays, guys like Brian McPhee make big plays, guys like Sadao were making a lot of plays. So you see a lot of other players out there that are doing their part to help win the game, and that's going to have to be the same thing here. I think Daniel Picard's going to have his game. I mean, he's always going to do his thing. It's really going to be about the leadership behind like Aiden Picard and McDermott and McPhee and all these other guys that have to really step up and continue playing. And like you said before, the Hogs are going to have to continue to keep fighting. That's really going to be the backbone of a run heavy team like the Pleasantville Panthers. You're going to have to win up front. And obviously when it comes to Lakeland, they struggle against the run, defending the run. So they're going to need to really hunker down, especially it's supposed to be a rainy day. It's going to be a really difficult time to really go do what they do best, which is throw the ball because they can. So they really need to try to slow down the game, win it in more of their time possession. Pleasantville is obviously just trying to control the game's time, right? I feel like that's going to be the big thing. Run the ball heavy and just keep it running, right? That's what I feel like any team that has a really good rush offense, control the line of scrimmage, right? I think that's the biggest thing.
Let's talk about another B game. Sleepy Hollow 1-3 at Pearl River, who's 2-1. And when you look at Sleepy Hollow, running the ball is also very important. Bowen has been really strong for them. Now they're missing Richardson, but Bowen has taken up things. He had 150 yards rushing last week and a touchdown. Fink had a nice passing touchdowns to Mejia. Defensively, they have given up a lot of points, and that's kind of the big concern. When you look at Pearl River, Degon McLaughlin is a big-time weapon for them on both sides of the ball. He had a receiving touchdown last week with Whalen. It's kind of been your that a nice tandem that's been developing as this offensive line has kind of continued to build some chemistry and momentum. Espinal had a rushing touchdown. He had 5 different players score a touchdown. Getting some of that balance offensively is going to be so important. I think defensively, though, they have been strong and stingent. I know they played Pleasantville very tough a couple weeks ago. This is I think a kind of a statement game at home. I'm going to go with Pearl River for them to kind of establish that they're one of the upper echelon B teams. I think they got to win this game. And I do think they're going to do it by having a balanced attack offensively and defensively, being very aggressive to slow down the rush attack. I'm going with Pearl River.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I think Pearl River has the full capability of owning this game. If the offensive line stays strong, they have a good balanced attack on both sides on offense and on defense. They control the line of scrimmage. I feel like defensively, they just need to slow down the run, and Pearl River's offense will be able to make some big plays offensive line-wise. They need to really step up here. But I do agree with you. They need to show up, and if they do, I think it'll be handily won if they actually, on the defensive side, slow down the run gain here. So I'm going to go with Pearl River.
I have a question here of B because it's in B and it's not a specific game. I will address it. Top 5 teams in B at this moment. Mars, you don't have to answer this, but I got Pleasantville. I got Ardsley. I got Rye. I got Lakeland. And my 5th team, I'm trying to remember exactly. I did put my rankings out this week.
Rye Neck?
Not Rye Neck. I know Rye Neck, the fans probably want to kill me, but oh my God, I'm drawing a blank, but I got my pick right here. Nyack. I have Nyack at 5. But again, I'm not going to answer that question each week, guys, because join my Patreon and you can see those rankings weekly. So I'll just give you that little nugget there this time around. Let's go to the next one. Speaking of Rye Neck, Mars, that's on the next game. We got Rye Neck 3-1 at Hen Hud, who's 0-3. I know we had some questions about Rye Neck, and let's address it first before we dive into the game. Personally, I think that Rye Neck can upset everyone in Class B and win the section title. Could you see this happening? Here's my thing. And every time I pick against Rye Neck, they think I'm hate, right? And I got to give a lot of props. Rye Neck is 3-1 Mars, probably one of their better starts in the last few years that they've had. Problem I see with Rye Neck is consistency. At times, their offense is high-powered. and the defense gives up some big plays. And at other times, the defense is playing very strong, but the offense can't get things going. So they're either playing a very high-scoring game or a very low-scoring game. Consistency is the big concern. When you play these big dogs like Pleasantville and Rye and Ardsley, consistency is key, right? So being inconsistent is a tough thing. So I do think Rye Neck, and again, I don't like giving them, they're on my bubble into the top 8 for my Beast rankings. So I will give that little nugget right there. But let's dive into this game. Are any quick thoughts on Rye Neck? Because I want to give you a chance. You seem to be their favorite panelist.
Listen, I am like the Skip Bayless for Rye Neck.
I don't know if that's a good thing.
I don't know if that's a good thing or not. I don't know because I don't know if
Stephen
you
want to be Shannon Sharp or Stephen A. as well.
I mean, Shannon Sharp. At least you can understand what I'm saying. So I mean, I mean, Rye Neck. You know that I got your back. I always been picking Rye Neck in those tough situations. I think for the past few years we've been always I've been picking them in those tough games, and I mean, are we gonna pick the game now? You want me to pick the game?
Yeah,
first?
Let's pick it. You got Rye Neck and Hen Hud, and I'll say this: Rye Neck 2 out of the last 3 weeks they have scored over 30 points, and it all starts with that quarterback Merkel. He's been tremendous, and he had 4 touchdowns last week. This defense, again, I mentioned it earlier. Which defense are we going to see? Right, the defense that gives up 20 points and some big plays, or the defense that gave up 7 points or 0 points? Right. So which Rye Neck defense I'm going to see, I'm not sure. But look at that Hen Hud, Mars. They were up on Nyack last week, 13-12 late in the fourth quarter. You're seeing some growth. The offense started to shape things around defensively. I think they'll make things a little bit tougher on Rye Neck. Don't be surprised. On the road, is Hen Hud going to beat Rye Neck? Well, guess what, Rye Neck, folks? I am going to go with Rye Neck. I think Rye Neck wins this game, but I think it'll be close. Hen Hud did show a lot of growth that I liked last week, but I'll go Rye Neck.
Yeah, so obviously we have Hen Hud. They're going to play tough against everybody. They've always been a very aggressive team. They have a lot of speed. They can make a lot of plays, and like you said, they're going to be competitive, right? Rye Neck has been having a great start this year, and they've been really impressing us. But like you said, Frank, it's really going to be dependent on which Rye Neck do we get, right? Is it going to be they're going to be a solid on all sides, or they're going to have some inconsistencies, and how big are these inconsistencies going to be, right? That's going to be the question, but you already know what I'm going to pick. I'm going Rye Neck, right? You know I'm going to have
Rye Neck Panthers.
Rye Neck here. I'm going to go with the win. I think that they've been showing a lot of growth. They just need to be more consistent on both sides of the ball and really stabilize that front, and I think they will. I'm going to go Rye Neck.
Yeah. All right, next game. I think one of the also biggest games. Nyack 2-1 at Rye. That's 2-2. This is a big league game right here. And we've had a couple questions into the chat, which again, we appreciate you guys as always doing that. Should we answer the questions first or do the game first?
I mean, we can answer questions first. That's fine.
Okay, let's do the questions first. Here's a thought. Thoughts on Rye this year. Disappointing or meeting standards? Again, what are the standards of greatness? I think you always need to evaluate at the end of the year, right? It hasn't been the start that they wanted, and I know losing to Harrison in week 0 hurts. Losing to Pleasantville hurts. But there's also context here. And I also love what I heard from Rye coming out of Pleasantville. They were missing 6 or 7 starters, right? And some key players on this team. They have dealt with the injury bug to start this year. But I love that it hasn't been an excuse. I spoke with AJ Miller after the game. I saw on Low HUD. He said, yeah, we're missing these guys, but that's not an excuse. We had a good game plan. We didn't execute. And I love that. That's leadership. And I think that's the sentiment that Rye is going to have going forward. And they got to get healthier. But what injuries do prove, Rye has been a strong program, Mars. How many times have we seen the Rye JV, put out undefeated season. Now it's opportunities for these younger guys to fill a greater role, and it'll help them towards the end of the season if those guys can come back. It creates depth. So it creates opportunity for these younger guys. So yes, maybe it's a disappointing start to the season, but they definitely have the talent. And I think the standard is that they want to compete for a championship. Can they still do that, Mars? I think they can. What about you? Quick thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, Rye has always been consistent. It was a really tough game between Rye and Pleasantville, just to say the least. I mean, it was a battle, right? And yeah, I do agree with you. It's all relative. I mean, what we say is a success was what winning the section title and moving on to the state tournament. I mean, is that what we deem to be success? And you have to wait and see what happens at the end. I feel like that's going to be really where you have a good evaluation, right? And like you said before, it's about context of knowing about kids with injuries and how many injuries and, what's the expectation when that happens. So I don't think they're going against their standard. I think they're one of the more successful teams in B. I just think that, if your goal is to not lose in the first week against Harrison, that is one thing. And, vice versa. You want to have a winning record at the end of the year. You want to move to the playoffs and so on. So we still got to wait and see at the end. But I think Rye is still a very good team overall.
All right, let's talk about the game. And there was one more question. I think Rye's rush attack versus Rye front seven. So I'll address that as we talk about this game. And looking at Nanuet, I thought the defense played really strong last week, but the offense got off to a slow start. Now, Nanuet has a lot of skill guys. They have their quarterback in Williams. They have a couple backs like Booton that can make some big-time plays. They really want to use their speed to their advantage as this offensive line continues to grow. And they're going up against a defensive front seven, Mars, that for the most part, I thought they did pretty well against Pleasantville's rush attack and Daniel Picard. They like to bring a lot of guys near the line of scrimmage, right? So they like to be very aggressive. They like to blitz a lot of guys. So this rush attack that wants to get to the outside, if they can handle the internal pressure of Rye, I think they can find some success. They're looking to break containing. That's the big thing Nanuet wants to do because they do have a lot of speed guys on their team. So it's going to be a very interesting matchup. I think Rye schematically likes to bring a lot of pressure. These linebackers are tough. They like to, again, blitz a lot. Don't know the health of some of their defensive linemen, but this Nanuet, if they can break that initial contain and get to that second level, their skill guys are very fast. They can make some big chunk plays in the rush attack. When you look at Rye, I'm really excited to see how they respond. They responded very well when they lost to Harrison. I have a feeling they're going to get another response here after this loss versus Pleasantville, Mars. And it starts at the quarterback spot with Miller. He turned the ball over a couple times. I think he could play better if you even asked him. I know he's missing a lot of weapons. Look for him to have a much stronger game in this one. Luliano is another guy, their running back. His offensive line did a pretty good job opening holes last week. I think they rely on that run game again. He's been pretty impressive the last couple weeks. He had over 100 yards last week running. This defense played strong, but they gave up some big pass plays. They like to play some man coverage because of the different pressures that they like to bring. So against the Nanuet skill guys, got to be careful. They got to get home. If they don't, they're going to put their DBs out on an island. Picking the game, I'm going Rye.
Yeah,
I think Rye at home, they win. They respond big time. Nanuet is a very good football team, but Rye responds in a victory.
Yeah, I was going to build on what you said about the fact that Rye, how often does Rye have two bad games in a row or losses in a row, for a say. It wasn't even a bad game against Pleasantville. It was a battle, right?
And they were off at one point, so it's not like...
No, I agree. And that's the point is that, Miller had a tough game against a good defense. And so, I think Miller's going to bounce back. He's going to have a solid performance. And I think that's going to kind of propel this offense to be more proactive. It's going to be able to move the ball a lot more. And that's why I'm going to go with Rye in this game. I feel like, Rye is going to be a really, they always bounce back in a way. They always regroup and figure out what they do best and emphasize that for the following week. And their defense is going to be setting the heat. And I think they're going to land on those stunts. I'm going to go Rye.
Real quick question, and I will give this, Marsh. You don't have to give this. Who do you think is going to the Class A section title game? Since we already talked about A, I'll give you breaking news now, everyone in chat. Somers versus Yorktown in the championship.
There you go.
Let's see it. All right. Let's continue. And again, we are going to get to your questions once we get to those games, guys. So don't worry. Really appreciate you guys putting those questions in the chat. We will get to it. We're getting through all the games. We're on B right now. Just did Nanuet at Rye. Let's do the next one, Mars. Nanuet 2-1 at Edgemont, who's 1-1. When I look at Nanuet offensively, this offensive line is scrappy, and this rush attack did do a better job getting back on track, although played a very tough Putt Valley defense. Evan Moran and Stemmerman are kind of the two lead backs right now, and look for them to rely on them. Now, defensively, they got back on track. They gave up way too many big plays versus Rye the week prior. They had a shutout last week. They forced 4 turnovers. That's the scrappiness of Nanuet, is they like to run the football and play good defense, and that's their formula. Now, going against Edgemont, they showed the ability to run the ball. Seidel was tremendous last week, 149 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. Larson's another guy at the quarterback spot, had 2 rushing touchdowns. Can this offensive line handle the scrappiness and physicality of Nanuet is the big question, because they like to run the ball as well. So it's going to be a nice clash there. Edgemont also forced a couple turnovers that were huge, but can they handle this rush attack? Big question. I like the scrappiness that Edgemont has, but I'm going to go with Nanuet. I think they win on the road this time, Mars.
Yeah, I feel like when you think about Nanuet, they're in that offense of we're just going to overpower you, get to the outside, get our skill guys, and it's move you around, right? the heavy rush offense that can really push bodies around. That's going to be their emphasis this game. And I feel like they have the advantage with their guys up front and just the way that the scheme works. Their defense has always been tough. I'm going to go with Nanuet here to win this game.
All right, we got the next one, and this is another one that we had a question on. Croton-Harmon 1-2 at Ardsley, who's 3-0. And one of the questions we have is, how is the Ardsley's offensive line going to, I'm going to say, fare against this Croton-Harmon defensive front? And let's just talk about Croton-Harmon. Defensively, I think that's been their most consistent unit so far this year. At times, we've seen sparks from the offense. They want to run the football. We know, like guys like Jones, Reed, Smithwich, who had 2 rushing touchdowns last week. It's going to be tough running against Ardsley, without question. This offensive and offensive line needs to have that. They're playing against a very disruptive front, and so they're going to have to really block well to run the football with consistency. They need to run the ball. The pass attack, although at times can make plays, they're really focusing on the run game. So it's going to be really important for Croton-Harmon to do that. Defensively, going up against this Ardsley offensive line, this Ardsley offensive line is going to be tough because they got some veterans, they got some size, they run the ball very well with both their quarterback and running back, and Croton-Harmon has a solid front seven. So, but they're a little bit undersized, right? Let's just call it what I like their physicality. I like what the intensity they play with, but they're undersized, so they got to play with very good technique. They got to play with good leverage, and their run fits they got to get into. These linebackers are really going to have to attack the line of scrimmage quickly. If they wait, this Ardsley offensive line is going to be pushing that D-line into you, and that's where these lanes are going to open up. So, to me, when I look at Ardsley, Rendy had over 200 total yards last week, a lot of it running. You know about Silverman running the football, and then Chenard over the top as a big-bodied wide receiver. So they have some guys at each level, but it's going to be about the trenches in this one, Mars. That's where this game is going to be won and lost. I'm going to go with Ardsley here. At home, they're a little bit bigger. They're a little bit stronger. I like Croton-Harmon's defense. Offensively, the consistency just not there for me. And so that's why I'm going to go with Ardsley.
Yeah, I feel like you said the magic phrase. It's going to be up to the big boys up front. And I feel like Ardsley has that advantage. They have the strength. They have and I know that Croton-Harmon has some big boys up front too, but I just feel like Ardsley's offensive line has been a lot more consistency. Like the consistency of this offensive line is in there. The front seven of Croton-Harmon has been solid, but I just feel like Ardsley's O-line is really going to be moving bodies around. They're going to have the advantages, and I think Ardsley's skill guys are just going to take advantage of that, that movement up front. So I'm going to go with Ardsley here.
All right, let's go to the next one. Putnam Valley 2-1 at the Briarcliff Hamilton football program was 1-2. This is a league game. And can I say this? I thought it was a huge moment for Putnam Valley against Nanuet. They played them very tough last week. It was a 14-0 game. Offensively, Meister is a huge key part of this offense. He had over 80 yards rushing, but the pass attack was just it struggled last week. The pass attack struggled mightily last week. They definitely have to be more consistent this week. This defense was very strong. They played really well. Jashaj has been really important on this defensive line and very disruptive. And Odin was another guy who made a bunch of plays on this defense. So I'm looking at Putnam Valley to go on the road here and play very well. The Briarcliff Hamilton football program, I like the way they played versus Irvington. Last week, the offense had a tough time moving the football and scoring points. Defensively, I thought they held up very well, but offensively, it was a bit of a struggle. And with this Putnam Valley defense that has been one of the top defense in points allowed in B, I'm going to go with Putnam Valley here.
Yeah, no, I feel you, man. I feel like Putnam Valley has been very consistent. They had a really good, it was a fight last week, right? And I feel like I do agree with you that, their pass attack has to be a lot more consistent. They need to be better overall. Meister has been a weapon for them, and I feel like they need to be more consistent going forward. And I feel like I'm also going to go with Putt Valley here. I feel like they had some momentum after the last game. It was a battle, and I feel like they're going to continue that into this week. I'm going to go Putt Valley.
I do have a question from the Hudson Valley Football League, a couple of them. Do you think Walter Panis can repeat as Hudson Valley Football League champs? They've all to a very slow start. We will get to their game. What I'll say is this: losing Carlucci, and again, not sure when he comes back, has kind of been an absolute devastation for that team on the offensive and defensive side. So it's going to be very tough, especially not knowing his health. So I don't think it happens this year, if I'm being blunt. All right, let's continue. I do see a hashtag rolling with Mars. Hey, I picked Rye Neck too. I just
been consistent. I
Yeah.
always root by.
Did I do Peekskill yet? Not yet. We're getting there, guys. Don't worry. Let's do the next B game. Byram Hills 1-2 at Irvington, who's 0-3. The story of Byram Hills has been two things. Number one, turnovers. That has been an ugly thing that they need to clean up ASAP. Last week, I think they had 4 turnovers, 3 of them INTs, Mars. Quarterback Accurso is a very talented football player. I feel at times he's pushing a little bit too much, right? He's forcing things that just aren't there, and has led to some ugly turnovers. And he is a super talented, super important player. And I think it's hurt because they haven't been able to run the ball consistently, right? And that puts a lot of pressure on your quarterback and a lot of pressure on the pass attack to be near perfect. And it hasn't been that. And so creating a little bit more of a balance, I think, is going to be so important, and just limiting turnovers. Defensively, they need to stop the run. Irvington can do a mix of things. They like to throw the ball. And this defensive line in front seven could generate pressure, because that's what hurt Irvington a couple weeks ago, was a lot of pressure on the quarterback. I can see Byram Hills using its size to its advantage. Guys like Quinn making some big plays. When I look at Irvington, I've seen some nice plays in the passing game. The guy Mason Can is someone to keep an eye on. He's been a big play guy for them, for Irvington. But I'm going to go with Byram Hills. I think they get back on track. I think they limit the turnovers this week. They win this game.
Yeah, I'm also going to agree with you. I think Byram Hills is going to win. I think, when you have a lot of turnovers, it really just deflates your offense, deflates your team, because now you got to send your defense back out there and they just feel demoralized. So I feel like I agree with you. Byram Hills can limit the amount of turnovers they have. I feel like they're going to have a lot more momentum going into different drives. And I think that they're going to limit their turnovers overall. And I'm going to go with Byram Hills to win.
All right, let's go to the last B game, Mars. Albertus Magnus 1-2 at Hastings, who's 0-3. Normally, I don't cover Albertus Magnus because it's an independent team, but congratulations to their new coach on their first victory last week. And I thought their defense played very well. They've made enough plays offensively. Defense played very well. And when we look at Hastings, it's been another mix. At times, their offense seems explosive, but defensively, they're giving up way too many plays. But I will say this. I think Hastings does turn it around at home. I think this is going to be one of the surprise. A lot of people picking Albertus Magnus. I'm going to go with Hastings at home to win this game. I think they make enough plays defensively to limit the offense, and they hit a big couple chunk plays by some of their best players. Hastings wins this one.
Well, I am going to disagree. I think that Magnus is going to get the win here. I think that they had a good momentum swing with their victory last week. Nothing against Hastings. I think Hastings is going to give them a fight. It's going to be a really close game, in my opinion, but I think Magnus is going to win. I'm going to go with Albertus Magnus.
All right. I do see a question here. Has anyone besides Danny Koch last week in Section 1 had over 250 all-purpose yards, an INT, and a touchdown? Off the top of my head, I don't know. I don't think so. Right? And it just shows you the importance that he is for Mahopac's offense, right? And really team.
Yeah.
And we've seen kind of the Koches, if you want to call it, these last 3 years have kind of been that. And it's no different with it's no different from Danny Koch. He's very important for that offense. So he's probably one of the more versatile players in the class. And if Mahopac smartly gives him the ball as much as possible, that he can. So I don't know. Maybe someone in chat knows, but off the top of my head, I mean,
if I was a fan of Mahopac, like in the student section, I'd be posting feed Koch as a hashtag all across social media.
Koch.
Feed Koch.
Yeah.
I feel like that would be like the
and
phrase
if I'm the
of
opponent,
the offense.
I'm saying feed anybody else but Koch. But let's go to the C&D games. This is probably one of the best games that we're going to see this weekend. Valhalla 2-1 at Dobbs Ferry is 2-0 Mars. Big rivalry game between these two programs. There's no love lost. Let's just say there's these two teams that have met in the championship quite a few times over the years. Dobbs Ferry is 13-3 versus Valhalla. They have won the last 3 games. But let's start with Valhalla. And I got to say this has been a impressive Valhalla team that I've seen so far. They took Westlake to the brink into overtime in the first week of the season. They've won their last 2. Won their last game. And the Foysettes have been a strong engine for this offense, running the football, especially Rob Foysette. But they have both Foysettes running the ball. Then you have O'Neal throwing the football. They have a nice combination to them. But it's the physicality of this offensive line that's going to be super important versus this Dobbs Ferry defense that has also been very impressive. When we look at Valhalla's defense, Mark, they have allowed 11 and 8 points. So this has been the last couple games. This has been a strong defense, a physical defense. They have limited big plays, and it's going to be their ability to stop the run that's going to dictate if they can win this football game. They did a really good job versus Westlake a couple weeks ago. Going to have to do that again this time around against Dobbs Ferry. But look at Dobbs Ferry. They have a couple guys. They love to run the ball, and the play-action pass was actually pretty deadly for them last week. Their quarterback, Hardnett, I thought had a strong game. They had McGoey at the fullback spot. Holman is another one. He had well over 100 yards last week. He was a spark plug at that halfback spot. But defensively, Mars, a guy to keep in mind, Marty O'Leary on the offensive line at the linebacker spot. I thought he had a super strong game, super impactful. It was all over the field when I was watching it. They forced two turnovers last week, 7 points. This one's very hard for me to pick. But when it's two very evenly matched teams, two physical defenses, I go with the home team on this one, not the Road Warriors. Dobbs Ferry wins in a slug-it-out, low-scoring football game. Dobbs Ferry.
Yeah, you know what? I do agree with you on a lot of these facets. I feel like defensively, both teams are going to be really tough. I think they're both going to be looking to try to run the ball heavily, but I think Dobbs Ferry has a better rush offense. Their hogs up front are going to be moving people around, and I do agree with you. When it gets this close, you usually pick the home team. Dobbs Ferry is going to be my pick here. I think they're going to win this game.
Love the comments, guys. Appreciate you guys, as always, tuning in. Again, this is going to be posted after, so don't worry about missing any picks. You guys can always go back. We're talking a lot of football here, guys. So appreciate you guys, as always. Let's keep going, though, Mars. Another huge matchup. Bronxville 1-2 at Haldane, who's 3-0. Haldane had that huge victory over Tuckahoe last week. Bronxville, we know about them. They want to run the football. They've dealt with some key injuries. It's been a bit of a slow start offensively, but keep an eye on guys like Formato and Patterson. Those are the two big engines in this rush attack, using their size up front. They want to try to run the football consistently. I think that tries to continue versus kind of the smaller Haldane football team. That's what I think Bronxville is going to do. We'll look at Haldane, Mars. Gian Chinta, he's probably going to be on one of the Players of the Year watch list for the C&D schools. He was a Frank's finest, Mars. He had over 200 yards last week. He's been a dominant football player. Quarterback Ryan Van Tassel as well. Rushed for 100. It's not a big passing game last week. 178 yards rushing last week for him. They had over 300 yards rushing. Look for them to try to do that. Dobbs Ferry had some success on outside runs versus Bronxville last week. Look for Haldane to try to mimic that this time around. Defensively, allowed 66 yards last week. That's going to be the key. They can slow down Bronxville. They had a bit of a struggle throwing the football. With Bronxville, if they can limit Bronxville's rush attack, I think they win. I'm going to go with Haldane, Mars. 4-0 Haldane. Sounds crazy, but I think it's going to happen.
You know what? I think Haldane has been having a really great season so far, and I think they will continue to do so. But I think they're going to have a little bit of a lax feel to this game, and they're going to say, we're at home. We're going to steamroll over Bronxville, and I think Bronxville is going to pull off of a big upset here. I think I'm going to pick Bronxville because I feel like they're going to limit the amount of big plays that Haldane has. They're going to have to try to make them grind this game out. I think Bronxville's offense is going to be high-powered like they usually are, and they're going to keep this train rolling. I think their offensive line's a big body group, so I think they have some strength advantage a little bit. I know Haldane's got some big boys too. I think they have some efficiency, but I feel like Bronxville is going to surprise Haldane, and it's going to be a close game. I think Bronxville pulls it off. I'm going to go Bronxville here.
With the upset. Another really cool game to me. I'd like to say the C&D games are really good this week. Westlake 2-0 at Tuckahoe's 2-1. When I look at Westlake last week, the offensive line and tight end group really dominated the show. They had, 5 different players score a touchdown last week. And that's going to be key because they're going up against a Tuckahoe front that's also very strong. That's the key matchup for me. But they have weapons, Westlake. Callie, their running back, tremendous. Zino had a couple touchdowns. Ricciello at the fullback spot also had a touchdown. We know about the quarterback in Pagan. They have multiple weapons, and they want to try to run the football. That's key. And then the play action pass out of that. And defensively, CJ Prosperino, he had a defensive pick 6 last week. This is a defense with guys like Neely. They have weapons at each level of this defense. They're fast, right? They're not huge, but they're fast, and they get to the ball quickly. And when I look at Tuckahoe, they got to be better in the run game. That's where the struggle was last week. And we've seen Tuckahoe, they've had great balanced attacks over the years. Last week was a struggle running the football. And they got to improve on that because if they just, again, they have a strong pass attack there. Quarterback Colachicho has been tremendous this year. He deserves a lot of credit. And that trio of wide receivers and Banky, Bryce, Cypher has been a deadly group. But can they Again, they have a strong offensive line, but can they get a consistent run game? Can they protect their quarterback? Going to be the big question here. If it's just a passing, drop back, sling it around game, I don't think it'll be enough. And because of that reason, I'm going to go with Westlake.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm going to agree with you. I think Westlake's going to win here. I think they're going to be a lot more defensively ready to try to limit the amount of explosive plays. Obviously, that Tucko is trying to have here. I feel like they need to develop more of their offense in order to kind of compete. And I think Westlake's defensively is going to really show up big time. And I feel like they're all going to have some. They have some obviously some weapons with Callie, right? And I think that he's going to have a great day. And he's been very consistent. So I think Westlake's going to win here.
Let's go to the next game. This is kind of a C versus Hudson Valley Football League crossover. Woodland's 0-2 at Ramapo is 0-3. Both teams trying to get their first win, Mars. And the quarterback Campbell, I thought was pretty efficient, 10 of 13 last week. But look for the defensive side. Jake Castile has been pretty strong, had a really good game last week. Locke was also an impact player for them. When I look at Ramapo, I thought they've been holding up relatively well defensively. 14 points last week, but offensively has kind of been the big question. They have a lot of athletes, but they scored 6 or less points 2 out of the last 3 weeks, right? So the offensive consistency and the turnovers have been absolute killers for them. Because of that, I'm going to go with Woodlands. I think Woodlands wins this game, and probably a very close one. Both teams have solid athletes, but I'm going Woodlands.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. I think Woodlands has a lot more skilled guys that can make those big plays. I think the turnover ratio is going to be the crucial difference between this game. Woodlands is going to be a little bit more consistent. I think they're going to win this game. I'm going to go with Woodlands.
I see a question here about an older pick, Yonkers Force versus John Jay. We both picked John Jay. You can go back and see those picks in the video. We kind of do a breakdown of it. But appreciate you tuning in and hope you stay.
Also, guys, make sure you hit that thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't done so yet. It really does. Guys. It really does mean a lot for the channel. All support, and obviously go check us out on our Patreon as well. Frank's been doing a really good job of posting out these exclusive videos for all Patreon followers and subscribers. So, definitely go help that out. When it comes to YouTube, guys, we are trying to pump out as many of these videos for you guys as possible, but we really need the support from the community. And the more hours we get on these videos, the more people we get to show this to, the bigger the channel gets to be. So I feel like the more support, spread this around, show your friends, show your family. We are here helping you guys get views, helping you guys get some exposure for all the hard work you guys do. So it's like for us, we just want to help show these kids, all the reputation. Like, we want them to see, people see how good they are, right? And that's really what the goal of this channel is. So yeah, all the support out there.
Yeah, and absolutely appreciate all our supporters already. We're almost done, guys. We've answered all the questions so far, but let's continue on the Hudson Valley Football League. Portchester 1-2 at Spring Valley. And I'll say this, Portchester had a tough game last week. It was an ugly game, rainy game. The defense definitely gave up way too many big plays and really struggled to stop the run game. They have to do better than that this week. Now, I do think they're going to respond pretty well, but Spring Valley, the defense has been very strong, Mars. They're very aggressive. They forced a bunch of turnovers. They've allowed 6 points each of the last 3 games. That's it. Right now, offensively has been a little bit inconsistent, but I think they make enough big plays in this one. With that defense, Spring Valley wins this game, Mars.
Yeah, I feel like I agree with you, man. Spring Valley's defense has been all over the field. Their speed has been killer. And I feel like they have been really the consistent side of this team. And I feel like they will show up again. Offense will score enough points to get them that lead. Defense will show up as always. I'm going to go with Spring Valley.
All right, let's keep it going. Walter Panis, 0-4 at Tappan Zee, who's 2-1. I talked about this Walter Panis. We got a couple of them. Carlucci loss has been so bad, so big for this team. And again, don't know his status, but I tell you what, I believe in the coaching over at Walter Panis. I think this is a proud team. I think this is a team that's got to keep grinding, do not give in, and, keep fighting, keep grinding, finding different ways to score on offense, and don't let the struggles on offense impact you defensively. That's kind of like the big message I have on the Walter Panis. But when you look at Tappan Zee, I like the way they're playing offensively. They've shown explosiveness. They have a 30-plus point game this year. I thought they made some big plays versus a good Westlake team last week. Tappan Zee, with the balance on offense, that they could spread the ball around different things. I think they win this game because Walter Pan is still trying to figure things out. I think it's leaked into their defense a little bit. Tappan Zee does need to improve a little bit on the defensive side. They've given up way too many big plays, but I'm going to go with Tappan Zee to win this one.
Yeah, I'm also going to agree. I think Tappan Zee is going to win. I feel like right now Panis is struggling just because of the fact of injuries, and I know they have good coaching over there. It's just really going to be, it's difficult to get when you lose a guy like Carlucci, who has really been impactful for this team. It's hard to kind of fill in that spot. So I think Tappan Zee just has more consistency right now. I'm going to go with Tappan Zee.
Yeah, and finally, to wrap it all off, guys, Poughkeepsie 1-3 at Peekskill, who's 2-1. And when we talk about Poughkeepsie, had a really nice overtime win versus Ramapo last week. Jalen Lee has been a guy who's been step up. You should keep an eye on him on the Poughkeepsie side. This pass attack also showed at times improving, and they also got their first win for their new head coach. So congratulations there as well. But when I look at Peekskill, Mars, Peekskill was talking some trash in my comments the other week because I didn't pick them 2 weeks ago, and they proved me wrong. So kudos to them, and shout out to Coach Garrity if he's watching. But I've been impressed. Peekskill, they played Spring Valley tough. In the last couple of weeks, Mars 30-plus points the last 2 weeks, and defensively, 6 points combined the last 2 weeks. They have played well on both sides of the football. I'm going with Peekskill. I think they're playing really at a high level. I think it continues this week at home. I think they go 3-1, Mars.
I do agree with you. I think Peekskill is very talented. I think both sides of the ball have been clicking. I think offensively they've been playing very well, and I feel like the fact that this defense is going to be kind of closing down on all the ends, I feel like the offense is going to get a lot of opportunities, and they're going to score a lot of points. I think Peekskill is going to win this game.
All right, guys, that was all the games. I can't thank you guys enough for tuning in and watching. I know it was a nice long show. Had to go through 29 different games, answering a bunch of questions, talking football. We want to thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, again, we're going to be posting this, so if you missed anything, you can always go back, but appreciate you. Mars, any last thoughts before we close it out?
Listen, man, it's been a great time. I would say I haven't been able to jump into as many of the videos as I did last year, but I always enjoy talking football with everybody. And like I always said, I said this before, make sure you hit that thumbs up and subscribe to support the channel. We put a lot of work into this, and it really does mean a lot for anyone that does hit that thumbs up and tunes in to watch our videos or watch the live streams like this. We put a lot of work into this stuff, so we always appreciate all the views and all the people coming out to support the channel. So we really appreciate it, guys. Yeah, and if you guys like this live long form, it may be something that we can continue. So let us know in the comments if you guys enjoy it. But with that, guys, we're signing off. See you guys next time.